especially now with NIL, they're getting these checks a lot quicker. They're getting money and they don't know what to do with it. And they're just like, oh, I can spend. And,
Yeah.
there's another one coming, but there might not be another one coming. And, oh, I
Yeah.
have to pay taxes on this. So it's really just, learning the basics, I would say, from the beginning and just knowing what's coming in and what's coming out. Because you always want to make sure that more is coming in than what you're spending.
Sports taught you how to compete, how to lead, how to push past limits when no one was watching. But what happens when the season ends, when the uniform comes off and the identity shifts? Welcome to the Beyond Her Game podcast. I'm Tori Barker, former Division I softball player and founder of Beyond Her Game. Athletes are trained to pursue excellence and lead under pressure, but no one prepares us for life when the game changes. This podcast is for female athletes building what comes next. We talk about business, brand, money, mindset, and identity beyond sports. The things no one teaches you in the locker room. Because the skills you built through sports don't disappear. They're just the beginning. Welcome to Beyond Her Game. Hi, everyone. Welcome back on the podcast. I am super excited to introduce my guest and our supporting friend, Pretzel. Today's guest,
Yeah.
we are speaking with Shana DiMarco. Welcome on the show.
Thank you so much for having me and him.
I love Zoom so much because it's reality, right? Sometimes there's kids in the background, pets in the room, pets on the lap. It's just so fun to, be able to
Yep,
talk to people in their own space, and we all love a good pet. So, thank you for being here.
exactly. Yes, thank you. Yeah, he loves being on my Zoom calls, so he'll just be there. He'll probably put his face in the camera at some point or just keep giving me kisses. I can't complain.
Aw.
So,
Well,
yep.
I'd love to jump right in. I know that you're known as the athlete advisor, so I'd love for you to talk about through your work with athletes, what made you realize that they needed a different kind of financial support?
Um, well, going back, I'm an athlete myself too, so I can relate to other athletes. We know what it's like to train, to have to really put in the focus for whatever sport we're playing, whatever athletics. It's a full-time job. You have to make sure you're eating right, your gym, the training, your focus, and getting your sleep and all of that. And when it comes to finances, it's kind of similar to a degree because you have to make sure that you're planning, for your future. Like everything's here. Like if something happens, this, you're planned for that. If you have something here, so it's that same type of focus, and that's what I dedicate to my clients to make sure that everything's in order, it's in alignment with what they want to achieve, and just making sure that if something goes wrong, there's a plan B, or that things will be okay. Because life can be crazy. We all know that. Anything could happen at any time. So just being able to mitigate those risks and things. So,
Yeah.
yes.
So, what is one thing that no one teaches you in the locker room about finances?
Um, it's a lot. It's like simple things like how to save, what it means to invest. People don't talk about life insurance. They don't talk about, retirement planning because, when we're athletes, we're not thinking about retirement. We're thinking about the now, but it's a long-term game. So
Yeah.
it's just like, you want to play your sport for a long time. You want to make sure that your finances grow and your money is growing a long term too. So I guess little mix of everything, I feel
Yeah.
like.
Well, and when we're talking about college athletes specifically, I think a lot of them are of the mindset that, I'm not making any money right now, or I'm not making enough money, um, or haven't seen a real paycheck yet. A lot of times, athletes are full-time athletes and they don't have time for jobs during college. So at what point do they need to start thinking about finances, or what are the first steps that they can do to prepare themselves before they get that first real paycheck?
I mean, the sooner the better. I know it's crazy at 18, you're not thinking about long-term future. I know at 18 I wasn't thinking about this stuff kind of thing. I wish like I knew about it because I'd be
Yeah.
even in a better position kind of thing. But because you never know, like especially now with NIL, they're
Mm,
getting these checks a lot quicker. They're getting money and they don't know what to do with it. And they're just like, oh, I can spend. And
yeah.
there's another one coming, but there might not be another one coming. And oh, I
Yeah.
have to pay taxes on this. And so it's really just, learning the basics, I would say from the beginning, just how to save, opening a savings, a checking account, um, even those little, and just knowing what's coming in and what's coming out, because you always want to make sure that more is coming in than what you're spending.
Yeah.
So even just trying to save from the beginning, I know it's hard, like you said, if they're not making money, but just, educating themselves so that way when that money does come in, whether it's, through sports, or if they start another career after college kind of thing, that, okay, like I'm not a millionaire, but at least know the steps that I can be in a much better position. And that way, things can grow faster and because you see, like, we've seen it a million times, these athletes, they make so much money and then when they're done with their sport, they're broke. And it's
Right.
like, how?
Yeah.
That kind
Yeah.
of thing. So you don't want to be in that position. So learning just basic stuff early is the way to go.
Yeah, it's just like building that foundation and building knowledge, right? Because knowledge is
Yeah,
power, right? And
sure.
it's so interesting to think about from, when I was an athlete, again, I wish I had known some of these lessons that we talk about, on a daily basis and, with guests here on the show. Those things I learned later on in life as an entrepreneur and self-taught, like you don't really know applying kind of my lessons as an entrepreneur to athletes with money is you don't really know what you don't know. And until you get that experience or you have money and you have to kind of figure out what to do with it, you're kind of like, oh, okay, I'll figure it out when I figure it out. But it's almost like building a team, right? Of financial, like your financial team, whatever that might be. And maybe you could touch on like who should be on your financial team, so that you can be prepared and building that foundation so that you're educated and knowledgeable to be ready once you're at a point like, okay, I got my paycheck or I got an NIL deal. Like, how do I handle this moving forward? Now I can apply those lessons that I've learned.
Exactly. Yeah, the more on your team, the better. Like again, going back to sports, you can't win without your team. So it's like having that same reliability, like having a financial advisor, having a CPA, if you're owning a business, having like a bookkeeper or working with like different lawyers and things too. And
Mm,
like all of us coming together, because I've seen that where it's like some people might have all those people, but they're not talking to each other. And then it's
yeah.
like, I'm telling you one thing, the CPA is telling you another thing, the lawyer's telling you a different thing, and then it's like it gets more confusing. So, like I've been trying to work more with if I have a client, like, I want to meet your CPA and I'm not gonna like try to undermine him or anything like that, but I just want to see, where he's coming with so I can build on top of that instead of building against it kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
having more people in your corner, like the team, the coach, all this, the trainers,
Yeah.
like you need that in your finances because things can change and, you want to do well and hopefully not pay too much taxes because I know
Right.
taxes are another burden. So, that kind of thing. But just knowing where, the money's coming in, what you have to pay in taxes and all that stuff. So,
Yeah.
like you said,
I
having a strong team.
Yeah, I love
Mm,
that because, like you said, it's not having fragmented advice, right? It's really a having coordinated clarity over what's happening in a holistic approach, right? Because, like you said, one person needs to talk to the other person and this person to that person because everything really ties into each other. And, if your CPA doesn't know what's happening on this side, then it's like, okay, I can't really advise you in the right way. Um, are there any examples that maybe you've had recently with an athlete, where you've had to help them restructure finances or advise them on something that was maybe new to them? I'd love to hear if you have any recent stories that you could share.
Um, I wouldn't say maybe restructuring, but the last couple of people I've worked with, it was literally starting from the beginning. Like,
Mm,
they didn't have really any type of retirement plan. They didn't have any insurance. They weren't saving at all. It was just kind of like
Yeah.
step one, baby
Yeah.
steps, that kind of thing. So that's what I see most of the time. It's kind of like, I have no clue. Help me get started. Like, okay. And then I'm like, how much are you spending a month? I don't know. How much you make a month? Maybe this. And it's like, okay, how are you spending more than you're making? And, trying to figure that out and, do a budget with them. Like, okay, you can spend like, I always hear like one less coffee a week or something like that. So like, just building better habits and just knowing what's coming in, what's going out. And, I'm all about like what they say, like treat yourself. You want to enjoy life, but you want to make sure that you're preparing at the same time. So just having that balance of
Yeah.
treating yourself and preparing for the future.
Yeah. Now, because I know that you work with athletes on all different levels, um, eh, is there a difference when it comes to an entry level, let's say, college athlete just getting, educated on their finances, just starting to get a paycheck versus maybe the mindset of a pro athlete or a high income athlete? When it comes to finances, is it a mindset thing or is it just basically the foundation? Like, is there a difference between those two levels?
To a degree, because I would think like the pro athletes, they're a little more established just because, of time and, their experience. So they might have some things in place and it's like, okay, putting it together, like I mentioned earlier, coming together with their other partners, things like that. People from the college, they're just starting out. You just turned like 18, you're barely an adult kind of thing. So they're, like, they're starting to build that foundation. So, it's mindset could be a little bit different, but as long they're thinking long term, like, okay, I know I need to do this. Let's get started. Again, so they might be at different levels. And, I'm working with, like you said, different types of people. And my work is customized to that person. It's definitely not a one size fits all kind of plan. So,
Yeah.
so it depends. And, I would say the pro, older, more experienced athletes are a little, they have a little bit more put together at this point just because of, again, experiences in life and they're, being older and things. So compared
Yeah.
to an 18-year-old, because I know I didn't have anything at 18. So.
Well, I'd love to transition a little bit and talk about you as an athlete. And, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about your athletic journey to where you are now and maybe the identity. Because I know, I was recently talking to some friends of mine about, points in our life that we have like this identity. I don't know what you call it, but like an intersection or something like you're trying to figure out
Mhm.
who you are, right? Like what I talk about a lot is that identity from athlete in college to whatever it is, pro athlete to career to family, whatever it might be. And then even like as an adult, like you have these transition points. I'd love to hear your athletic journey and maybe some identity transition points that you've had.
Gotcha. So yeah, like my journey is a little bit different. Like most athletes, they, are playing as a kid, playing in college. I really didn't get into, I wrestled just to explain. I didn't get, I didn't really start wrestling till after college. So I was a late bloomer in the athletic world. I always grew up loving sports. Like, played basketball with friends, played a little baseball or whatever. I did some cheerleading in middle school. I did dance in college. So that was like my sport then.
Yeah.
And I grew up loving, but it was funny. Like I grew up loving wrestling, never thought I would do it. It was just, I wanted to be a producer for WWE. That was like my dream job when I was in college. I was like, I studied broadcasting. I was like, I want to work for them again. Never thought
Yeah.
about wrestling. So, but then again, being here in New York, I started going to a lot of independent shows and met a lot of wrestlers. And they're like, you should do it. You know wrestling. And da da da. And I was like, okay, let's try it. That kind of thing. Like I was just like, I don't know what I'm getting in myself into. Like I love the sport. I have so much respect for them. You hear like, it's fake, it's this or whatever, but they train just as much as any other athlete.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
the
bet.
results are predetermined and things like that. So, it's sports entertainment. But they are truly athletes, like, to be able to flip and bump and do all this. Like even
Yeah.
I'm in awe and I've been doing it for so long and I'm like, I can't do that flip, like, that kind of thing. So I got into like to wrestling into my 20s and um it was a weird identity because a lot of people were younger,
Mm,
so it was like I was the old one like coming in late and it's like my trainers were like my age but they were like wrestled all over the world at this point, they were like semi-famous and things, so it's just like
yeah.
here I am training with like a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old and it's just like I feel like a mom like that kind. but I mean, I had a lot of wonderful experiences. I got to do a lot of extra work with WWE, so my life came full circle in that way. Being like backstage WrestleMania, things like that. So, and I still wrestle from time to time now, like not a lot. Like, I'm focusing on my financial career. That's where, like, my life is going. So, but it's
Yeah.
still, but like you said, that identity, it's like, okay, I don't see myself, I'm not trying to get signed to WWE, anything like that at this point. And I'm just still enjoying wrestling. Well, it's in part of my life and, I'm part of a great school and things like that. But it's kind of like, okay, like I'm not trying to make it my career. Like, when do I officially finish wrestling? Like, do I keep trying? I'm like, I want to have one last run, but then I'm like making the time to train and put the effort. It's
Yeah.
like life is, so many things going on. And, so I'm having that identity like, okay, like when do I officially like stop wrestling? Like, is it just gonna be, there's always like a joke with wrestlers, like they never really retired as people are like 60 still doing matches. So it's like weird sport. So, I could be 60 still going. We don't know. We'll find. So, so I am going through that, like, okay, like this is the end of my career, but I don't know when it's going to end at the same time. So I guess that's my identity crisis at
Yeah.
the moment.
Well, and
So,
when you were, one of the big things we talk about always is mindset, right? And
mhm.
as you went into this new identity, what were some of the mindsets that you had to, like, I'm sure, like most of us, we have imposter syndrome, or should I really be doing this? Like, what are some of those experiences that you had early on, or maybe that you still find yourself, trying to retrain your brain on?
Oh yeah, I go through that. The imposter syndrome is unfortunately my best friend at this point. I feel like, when I first started training, it was just kind of like, how I mentioned, like I'm older than everybody, and I'm like, am I really, like
Yeah.
it's late to be getting into this. Like, am I really gonna do anything with this? But I was able to fight through it, and and that's where like having a good support system really matters. Like even though wrestling's kind of an individual sport, but especially because it's scripted, you really have to work with the person that you're wrestling
Mm,
with. Want to make sure that nobody gets hurt. They're trained, you're trained, learning how to take their moves and your moves, and right, yeah, exactly. So I'm here. I'm still here, but he just loves being on camera. But he's so cute, so it's okay. Um, so I did go through it a lot, and then it was like, like like say they're doing a drill and everybody does the drill right, and like I mess it up, that it's kind of like, okay, like why am I doing it if I can't do it, everybody else can do it, kind of thing. So you go through that a lot, and
yeah.
um it was just weird. It's hard to explain it, I guess, in a way, but
Yeah. Well,
definitely had that like even now, and I'm just like, I should just stop. Like, why am I still trying to wrestle? But I'm like, I love it, and I still want to be a part of the sport. And I remember I wrote like something, because I was like the storyline with my school where I was like the GM, but I lost that role, so I made it look like I was quitting wrestling, and people were kind of, a couple people were like, no, I'm sorry, like, you don't quit yet. And I'm like, oh, people really care. Like, they don't know this is a storyline. Okay. Like, they still believe it. Like, so it's nice, So it's,
yeah.
I don't know, it's weird. But yeah, wrestling's just an interesting sport.
Well,
But
it's so interesting. I feel like the more I talk to people in this space, the more I hear from women. Well, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's just women, but it just happens to be you and this other person were both female. That later in life, you're starting like another sport career, right? There was someone else that I was talking to who started bodybuilding in her 40s. And so it's so interesting. Like, I think I'm in
that's
my
what I'm going
40s.
through now, too.
Yeah,
So
and it's
yeah.
like I'm in my 40s, and obviously my athletic career was in my younger years, my youth and in college. But, I'm thinking, what the heck would I do? If I were to rekindle that athletic skill or, passion that I have. And so it's so funny to hear like, oh yeah, I started doing this. I picked it up, or, I really was
That's
passionate
how I got
about
into
it.
the strongman world. Like,
So
like I
interesting.
started doing strongman like 2 years ago, and I'm like, I'm 30, at the time I'm 30, I just turned 40 this past year. So, trying to pretend I'm still in my 30s. But,
Yeah.
I never thought at 40 years old I'd be trying to lift heavy things for no reason, is like I joke, whatever
Yeah.
kind of thing. But, I got into it. I had joined the CrossFit gym, and like one of the coaches, he specializes in strongman, and he's competed at worlds, and he's like, you're strong, you should do it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, let's try it, you know, like, and I just wanted to get in better shape for myself. And then like seeing that I could lift heavy, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like I'm stronger than I was in my 20s. So I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
you know, so I want to keep it going. And it's just like, you know, like for me, like the strong man is just like, again, I'm not, I mean, I would be cool to compete at Worlds, but those people are strong. Like I'm not that
Yeah.
level. But like to know that I can lift like 300 pounds off the ground, I'm like, I never thought in my life I could lift that much. And it's still
Yeah.
like, oh, I mean, I can't do it every day, but you know, but it's liberating, and just, keeping yourself in shape, and, having the community of CrossFit. Like my gym is great. Like, we don't try to compete with each other. Like I know like some places could be very catty, and, you probably dealt with that in sports. Everybody wants to be better than everybody else.
Yeah.
But like, my gym, we all get along. We just be silly. We be mean to the coach because he deserves it. No, I'm kidding. But, and it's just like, I don't know where it's going to take me. Again, I'm not trying to make it like my career. I mean, it would be cool to compete at like nationals or something like that at some point,
Yeah.
but it was just something I kind of fell into, and, I love it. And it's
Yeah.
keeping me in shape, it's keeping me consistent in the gym. We got to take care of ourselves as we get older. And, like you said, we're 40s, and it's just like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, we're not spring chickens no more.
Yeah. Well, and I think
Kind of
there's
thing,
something to be
but,
said for that too, because, for any young athletes that may be listening to this to understand, that sure, after your college career, you may go through this identity, shift of, I was this high elite competitive athlete, XYZ. Now I'm going into my career, I'm never going to play sports again, or like, what is sports going to look like, in this new chapter? Like, I think it's almost like that perspective for people to really understand that it doesn't have to go away. It's going to shift. It's going to change a little bit, yes, but there's still ways, and I talk about this all the time, there's still ways that you can leverage all of those skill sets that you learned in sports and athletics to what you apply to in your adulthood, in your career, in your next athletic, encounter, whatever that might be. So I think it's just kind of maybe hopeful, if you will, to think about, as a young athlete that it doesn't
yep.
have to go away.
Yeah, I don't think it really ever goes away for us. Like you said, it just shifts to a different thing. Like some people become coaches, or some people apply, like you said, the lessons that they've learned in sports to whatever career they decide to go forward. Or it could be like somebody like me, or like your other friend that you mentioned, where like in 40s now we're doing a whole different thing that we never saw in our lives.
Yeah,
And so yeah, sports, I don't think ever really goes away. When you're passionate about it, it's always going to be a part of your life in one way or another. So, sports for
absolutely.
life.
Yeah. So I'd love for you to wrap it up and give us maybe one final piece of advice for a young athlete, college athlete, who may be listening and thinking, I'll figure the money part out later. What would you say to them?
I mean, enjoy your life, enjoy the time. Like college goes by so quickly. So enjoy what you're doing, but, be prepared for your future. Start thinking, it doesn't have to be like literally that's your whole life. Oh, I got to plan money and da, 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 da. Like again, to go back to treating yourself with planning for your future. We are, people living longer, it's hard to imagine when you're 18, like you would or something like that. But like you'll realize when you get into your 40s, you'll wish you had started planning in your 20s. So enjoy life, but start thinking ahead too, and finding that balance and everything. So
Absolutely. So, how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about the financial world that you're in, or maybe just be connected with you and see the amazing things that you're up to?
I'm on social media. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. You can find me by my full name, Shana DiMarco. I have pages on there. You can always shoot me a message if you have any questions about your planning. Always happy to help and give advice, all that good stuff. So you can find me there. I think that's the easiest way.
Well, awesome. Well, Shayna, thank you so much for being a guest. I love, obviously talking sports and sharing a little bit of advice and your knowledge on finance and wealth, and just appreciate having you as a guest.
Aw, thank you so much. This was awesome. Thank you again for having me. And Pretzel, but he left.